What if Japan's most disturbing sci-fi movies were never really about the future, but about what humans become when fear, technology, and obsession go too far? These films don't just show aliens, machines, mutations, or dystopian cities. They attack the body, the mind, and the idea of identity itself. From cyberpunk nightmares to grotesque experiments, this countdown reveals the 15 Japanese sci-fi films that pushed cinema into truly uncomfortable territory. And number one may be the most disturbing transformation ever put on screen. Wild Zero, 1999. Some movies whisper their madness slowly. Wild Zero kicks the door down with a guitar, a flying saucer, and a blood-soaked grin. In 1999, director Tetsuro Takeuchi delivered one of Japan's strangest sci-fi explosions. Part alien invasion, part zombie apocalypse, part punk rock fever dream. The story follows Ace, a young fan obsessed with the real-life Japanese rock band Guitar Wolf, as the world suddenly collapses into chaos when aliens trigger a flesh-eating outbreak. What makes Wild Zero so disturbing is not just the gore, it is the way the film refuses to behave like a normal movie. It turns death, desire, identity, and violence into a loud, messy carnival of destruction. Beneath the absurd comedy, there is a nasty little nightmare about society losing control in seconds. It may be the most fun film on this list, but do not mistake fun for harmless. The X from Outer Space, 1967. Before Japanese sci-fi became cyberpunk, industrial, and psychologically brutal, it also had monsters that looked like fever dreams from another planet. The X from Outer Space from 1967 may seem colorful at first, but beneath its campy surface is a strange alien invasion nightmare about humanity poking into space and bringing back something it cannot control. A mysterious spore from a UFO grows into Gilala, a massive alien creature that turns scientific curiosity into global panic. What makes it fit this list is not extreme gore, but weirdness, the kind of old-school sci-fi weirdness that feels charming and unsettling at the same time. The creature design is bizarre, the atmosphere is pulpy, and the fear is simple. Space is not empty, and whatever answers humanity finds out, there may not want to stay distant. It is the perfect opening entry, strange, vintage, and quietly menacing. The Human Vapor, 1960. Some sci-fi monsters are terrifying because they destroy cities. The Human Vapor is disturbing because its monster still has a broken heart. In 1960, director Ishiro Honda created a tragic body transformation story about a man changed by scientific experimentation into a being who can dissolve into vapor and pass through walls. At first, that sounds like power, but the film slowly turns that power into loneliness, obsession, and emotional ruin. The central character uses his impossible ability to commit crimes, but his motivation is tied to love, desperation, and the need to protect a woman whose career is fading. That makes the movie more haunting than a simple monster story. It asks what happens when science gives a wounded person the ability to escape every barrier except his own sadness. The effects may be vintage, but the idea still cuts deep. Becoming more than human does not always make someone free. Sometimes it makes them impossible to save. Matango, 1963. A deserted island should feel like survival. Matango turns it into a slow infection of the soul. In 1963, Ishiro Honda directed one of Japan's most disturbing sci-fi horror films, a strange and moody nightmare about shipwrecked survivors who discover a ruined vessel, a mysterious fungus, and a warning that comes too late. At first, the danger seems physical: hunger, isolation, storms, and the need to stay alive. But the real horror begins when the characters are tempted by the island's strange mushrooms, which slowly transform people into fungal, half-human creatures. What makes Matango so effective is its psychological cruelty. The survivors do not collapse only because of the monster. They collapse because fear, desire, selfishness, and desperation were already growing inside them. The mushroom transformation becomes a perfect symbol for moral decay. By the end, Matango feels less like a creature feature and more like a nightmare about civilization rotting from within. Quiet, eerie, and deeply strange, it earns its place before the countdown turns even more violent. Avalon, 2001. What happens when escape becomes more addictive than real life? Avalon from 2001 is Mamoru Oshii's cold, elegant, and deeply unsettling answer. After shaping anime history with Ghost in the Shell, Oshii moved into live action with a dystopian story about an illegal virtual reality wargame that players enter like soldiers walking into a dream. The heroine, Ash, is one of the best players in this dangerous digital world, but every mission pulls her closer to a place where the border between simulation and reality begins to dissolve. The film's washed-out visuals, military atmosphere, and ghostly pacing make it feel less like entertainment and more like being trapped inside a dying computer memory. Avalon is disturbing because it does not scream. It calmly asks whether people would choose a beautiful fake world over an unbearable real one. By the end, the scariest question is not what is real, it is whether reality still matters. Electric Dragon ADV 2001. Before modern superhero movies turned electricity into a clean special effect, Electric Dragon ADV made it feel like a curse burning under the skin. In 2001, director Sogo Ishii, also known as Gakuryu Ishii, unleashed a black and white cyberpunk blast that feels less like a traditional story and more like a live wire shoved directly into cinema. The film follows Dragon Eye Morrison, a man whose childhood accident leaves him charged with violent electromagnetic energy. He plays guitar, wrestles reptiles, and eventually clashes with another electricity-powered freak in a Tokyo that looks industrial, dirty, and half insane. What makes this film so unforgettable is its speed, texture, and attitude. Every frame feels scratched, overloaded, and ready to explode. There is not much comfort here, only noise, rage, mutation, and urban electricity turned into personality. It is disturbing not because it shows the end of humanity, but because it imagines humanity evolving into pure voltage. Electric Dragon ADV is short, sharp, and completely unhinged, a sci-fi shock attack that leaves burn marks. The H-Man, 1958. A glowing puddle should not be frightening until it starts wearing the memory of a human body. The H-Man from 1958 came from director Ishiro Honda, the same filmmaker who helped define Japan's post-war monster cinema with Godzilla. But this one is stranger, slicker, and more quietly grotesque. The story begins with criminals, nightclub shadows, and missing bodies, then slides into radioactive horror when people exposed to nuclear testing are transformed into liquid, glowing slime creatures. What makes the H-Man disturbing is how it turns the human form into something unstable, soft, and impossible to protect. A man does not simply die here. He dissolves, melts, and becomes a crawling reminder of atomic fear. The film carries the anxiety of a country still haunted by radiation, mutation, and the invisible consequences of science pushed too far. Its noir atmosphere gives the horror a grimy underworld edge, while the sci-fi concept makes every disappearance feel contaminated. The H-Man may look vintage today, but its central fear still bites. What if the body is not destroyed in an explosion, but slowly erased into something that still hungers? Cashern, 2004. Cashern does not feel like a movie you watch, it feels like being buried under a beautiful war machine. In 2004, Kazuaki Kiriya turned the classic anime hero into a massive live-action dystopian nightmare filled with polluted skies, endless battlefields, artificial humans, and spiritual exhaustion. The story unfolds in a world ruined by war and disease, where desperate scientists try to use advanced technology to restore life. But instead of salvation, their experiments create the Neo-Sapiens, beings born from dead flesh and human arrogance. That is where Cashern becomes more than stylish chaos. Beneath its digital visuals and operatic action, it is a bleak argument about revenge, nationalism, science, and the endless cycle of violence. Every character seems trapped inside a world that has already lost its soul. The film can be overwhelming, even messy, but that is part of its disturbing power. It does not present the future as sleek or exciting. It presents the future as grief with machinery attached. Cashern is not subtle, but it is unforgettable, a sci-fi tragedy screaming that humanity may invent miracles only to weaponize them. Marabito, 2004. Some people look into the darkness and run away. Marabito asks what happens when someone looks too long and brings something back. In 2004, Takashi Shimizu, best known for Ju-On, created a colder, stranger nightmare about Masuoka, a freelance cameraman obsessed with fear itself. After witnessing a man stab himself in the eye in a Tokyo subway, Masuoka becomes convinced there is a hidden world beneath the city. His search leads him into underground tunnels, mythic shadows, and finally to a pale, silent girl chained in the depths. He takes her home, but what begins like a rescue slowly turns into something far more unsettling. Moribito is disturbing because it lives between sci-fi, urban legend, cosmic horror, and psychological collapse. The camera becomes a weapon, a confession, and maybe even a disease. Masuoka does not just document terror. He needs it to prove that reality is bigger and uglier than ordinary life allows. Shot quickly on digital video, the film has a raw, unstable texture that makes Tokyo feel haunted from underneath. Its punch is quiet but poisonous. Curiosity may not reveal truth, it may reveal the part of you that wanted the monster all along. Pulse, 2001. The internet was supposed to connect people. Pulse turns it into the loneliest doorway in cinema. In 2001, Kiyoshi Kurosawa created one of Japan's most quietly devastating tech nightmares, a film where the end of the world does not arrive with explosions, but with empty rooms, frozen screens, and people slowly vanishing from one another's lives. The story begins with strange computer messages, shadowy figures, and a website that seems to let the dead leak into the world of the living. But Pulse is not frightening because ghosts appear. It is frightening because those ghosts do not chase people like monsters. They simply infect the world with hopelessness. Every apartment, office, and hallway feels drained of warmth, as if technology has opened a hole in human connection and something unbearable has slipped through. What makes Pulse so disturbing is how prophetic it feels. Long before online isolation became an everyday fear, the film imagined a society where people could be more connected than ever and still feel completely abandoned. Kurosawa uses silence, distance, and dread like weapons. The apocalypse here is not loud, it is emotional extinction. By the time the film expands from personal horror into social collapse, the message feels brutal. Maybe the scariest thing technology can do is not kill us, but teach us how to disappear while still being alive. Cure, NET97. Cure does not need machines, monsters, or futuristic cities to feel like science fiction. Its weapon is much simpler, a question repeated softly until the human mind begins to crack. Kiyoshi Kurosawa delivered a psychological nightmare that follows Detective Takabe as he investigates a series of murders committed by ordinary people with no clear motive. Each killer appears calm, confused, and strangely emptied out, while the same mysterious mark is left on the victims. At the center of it all is Mamiya, an amnesiac drifter whose presence seems to erase identity, memory, and moral restraint from anyone who comes near him. What makes Cure fit this disturbing sci-fi adjacent list is its terrifying idea of mental infection. The film plays like hypnosis. Psychology and supernatural suggestion have merged into something almost clinical. Mamiya does not behave like a villain in the usual sense. He does not rant, threaten, or explain. He simply asks questions, waits, and lets people reveal the violence already buried inside them. That is why the film is so unnerving. It suggests evil may not arrive from outside the body at all. It may already be waiting inside the mind, needing only the right signal to wake it. Cure's impact on Japanese horror and international psychological thrillers is enormous because it refuses easy answers. It leaves you with the feeling that identity itself is fragile, that personality is just a thin surface, and that one calm voice could peel it away. This is not a movie that jumps at you. It follows you home. Gok, Body Snatcher from Hell, 1968. Few alien invasion films feel this bitter, this hysterical, and this completely doomed. Gok, Body Snatcher from Hell, from 1968, begins with a plane full of strangers already trapped inside human cruelty. There are criminals, politicians, war profiteers, and frightened civilians, all carrying private guilt before anything extraterrestrial even appears. Then the aircraft crashes into a blood-red wasteland, and a strange alien presence begins turning survivors into pale, cracked, blood-drinking puppets. It is sci-fi, horror, disaster cinema, and moral punishment all rolled into one wild nightmare. What makes Gok so disturbing is its atmosphere of total hopelessness. The aliens are frightening, but the humans are almost worse. Instead of bonding together, they panic, accuse, betray, and expose just how rotten society already is. The body-snatching element works because it feels symbolic as well as physical. People are not simply possessed. They become the final form of selfishness, hunger, and fear. The film's psychedelic visuals, especially the bleeding skies and eerie alien effects, give it the feeling of a bad dream painted in emergency colors. Released during an era shaped by Cold War anxiety, Vietnam War imagery, and nuclear dread, Gok reflects a world convinced it may already be past saving. Its ending is famously bleak, turning the story from survival horror into apocalyptic judgment. This is not the kind of sci-fi that offers heroic resistance or comforting spectacle. It looks at humanity, finds something diseased, and lets the universe finish the diagnosis. As a countdown entry, Gok earns its place because it is not just disturbing to watch, it is disturbing in what it believes about people. Rubber's Lover, 1996. Some films feel dangerous because of what they show. Rubber's Lover feels dangerous because it sounds like it is trying to drill through your skull. Director Shozen Fukui created one of the harshest cyberpunk nightmares to come out of Japan's underground film scene. Shot in brutal black and white, the film traps you inside a secret laboratory where scientists conduct violent psychic experiments on a human subject using sensory deprivation, drugs, pressure, and pure psychological abuse. There is no sleek future here, no shiny neon fantasy, just rubber suits, concrete rooms, industrial noise, and people pushing the human nervous system until it breaks. The story follows a group of researchers trying to unlock psychic power through extreme suffering, but Rubber's Lover is less interested in traditional plot than physical experience. It feels sweaty, claustrophobic, and hostile, as if the movie itself has been locked in a basement and fed electricity. The performances are frantic, the editing is aggressive, and the atmosphere suggests a world where science has lost every trace of morality. What makes it so disturbing is the idea that evolution may not come through progress, but through torture. The film belongs beside Japan's most infamous cyberpunk works because it understands that the real horror of technology is not the machine itself. It is the human desire to use the body as raw material. Rubber's Lover does not entertain gently, it attacks. By the end, the experiment feels less like fiction and more like a punishment ritual disguised as science. If Tetsuo is metal madness, Rubber's Lover is psychic violence turned into cinema ugly, suffocating, and impossible to forget. 964. Pinocchio, 1991. Some cyberpunk films imagine the future as sleek and dangerous. 964 Pinocchio imagines it as filthy, broken, and screaming in the street. Directed by Shozen Fukui, this underground Japanese nightmare follows a discarded artificial human known as Pinocchio, a lobotomized cyborg left wandering through Tokyo with no memory, no control, and no real understanding of the body he has been trapped inside. What begins as a strange story of identity quickly mutates into a disturbing collapse of flesh, technology, trauma, and madness. The film feels raw in a way that polished sci-fi rarely does. Its world is not made of clean laboratories or stylish neon cities. It is made of alleys, sweat, vomit, panic, and damaged people trying to survive inside a society that treats bodies like disposable machines. Pinocchio's breakdown is not heroic or beautiful. It is humiliating, painful, and almost unbearable to watch, which is exactly why the film has such a strong cult reputation. What makes 964 Pinocchio so disturbing is its refusal to separate technology from suffering. The body is not upgraded here, it is violated. Identity is not discovered, it is ripped apart. As a countdown entry, it belongs near the top because it captures the ugliest side of Japanese cyberpunk. The fear that when humans create artificial life, they may only create new ways to suffer. Meatball Machine, 2005. A love story should not end with bodies becoming weapons, but Meatball Machine takes loneliness, attraction, and alien invasion, then grinds them into something almost unrecognizable. In 2005, directors Yudai Yamaguchi and Junichi Yamamoto delivered a grotesque sci-fi splatter film built around one of the nastiest ideas in Japanese body horror: alien parasites that invade human hosts and transform them into biomechanical fighters. These creatures do not simply kill people, they remodel them. Flesh opens, weapons grow, metal merges with organs, and ordinary human pain becomes fuel for a cruel alien sport. The film follows a shy factory worker named Yoji, whose miserable life briefly brightens when he becomes drawn to a woman named Sachiko. But romance in this universe is doomed from the start. Once the parasites arrive, human emotion is twisted into combat, and people who might have saved each other are turned into monsters forced to destroy each other. That tragic core is what makes Meatball Machine more disturbing than its outrageous gore might suggest. Beneath the splatter, there is a sick little heartbreak. The body becomes a prison, and love becomes another thing aliens can corrupt. Its low-budget roughness actually makes the horror feel more filthy and handmade. The effects are sticky, absurd, and disgusting in a way polished CGI could never fully replace. Meatball Machine belongs on this list because it takes the cyberpunk dream of human-machine fusion and makes it humiliating, painful, and grotesquely biological. This is not transformation as power. It is transformation as violation. The movie may look insane, but its fear is simple and brutal. What if your body stopped belonging to you and your last human feeling was used against you? Tokyo Gore Police, 2008. If a city could have a nervous breakdown, it might look like Tokyo Gore Police. In 2008, director Yoshihiro Nishimura pushed Japanese splatter cinema into full cyberpunk chaos, with a film that imagines a privatized police force battling mutants called engineers, people whose wounds transform into bizarre organic weapons. A missing limb becomes a chainsaw. A torn body becomes a battlefield. Every injury is not an ending, but an invitation for the body to become something more obscene. It is violent, absurd, political, and completely committed to its own madness. The story follows Ruka, a sword-wielding officer hunting engineers while uncovering the corruption and trauma buried inside the system she serves. On the surface, Tokyo Gore Police is a carnival of blood and impossible mutations, but underneath the gore is a nasty satire of authority, surveillance, corporate policing, and social decay. The future it imagines is not clean or advanced. It is commercialized brutality, where violence has become entertainment and the human body is just another product to be modified, punished, and sold back to the public. What makes the film disturbing is its refusal to separate horror from spectacle. It knows the images are outrageous, but it also knows society can become numb when violence is repeated enough. That is the uncomfortable trick. You laugh, then you recoil, then you realize the movie may be laughing at your reaction. Tokyo Gore Police is not subtle, and it does not want to be. It is a blood-soaked cyberpunk scream about a world where institutions are monstrous, bodies are unstable, and justice has mutated into performance. As disturbing sci-fi, it earns its place by turning the future into a wound that never closes. Akira, 1988. Akira is not disturbing because it predicts the future. It is disturbing because so much of its nightmare still feels possible. In 1988, Katsuhiro Otomo turned his own manga into one of the most influential animated sci-fi films ever made, a landmark vision of Neo-Tokyo after destruction, reconstruction, corruption, and unrest. The city is dazzling and rotten at the same time, full of biker gangs, political protests, military secrets, religious panic, and teenagers abandoned by the adults who claim to control the world. Then one boy, Tetsuo, is pulled into a government experiment, and his pain becomes power. That is where Akira transforms from cyberpunk action into psychological body horror. Tetsuo is not just a villain or a victim. He is a wounded child given godlike force before he has any emotional stability to survive it. His body begins to betray him, expand, mutate, and consume everything around him. The famous transformation sequence remains one of the most horrifying images in animation because it turns power into disease. The more Tetsuo grows, the less human he becomes. The film's impact is massive, influencing global animation, cyberpunk cinema, music videos, video games, and the visual language of dystopian cities. But its real force comes from its anger. Akira is about youth crushed by systems, science without compassion, and societies that rebuild skyscrapers while ignoring trauma underneath. It is beautiful, violent, tragic, and overwhelming. The punchy truth is this: Akira is not just one of Japan's greatest sci-fi films. It is one of cinema's most frightening warnings about what happens when a damaged world hands unlimited power to someone already breaking inside. Tetsuo, the Iron Man, 1989. There are disturbing movies, and then there is Tetsuo, the Iron Man, a film that feels less watched than survived. In 1989, Shinya Tsukamoto created a black-and-white cyberpunk body horror nightmare that exploded out of Japan's underground cinema and became one of the most extreme visions of human transformation ever put on screen. The story begins with obsession, injury, metal, and guilt, then spirals into a fever dream where flesh and machinery fuse in ways that feel painful, sexual, industrial, and apocalyptic all at once. It does not explain itself politely. It attacks the senses. The film follows a salaryman whose body begins sprouting metal after a violent encounter connected to a mysterious metal fetishist. From there, reality collapses into rust, wires, drills, sweat, screaming, and stop-motion mutations. What makes Tetsuo so disturbing is not just the imagery, though the imagery is unforgettable. It is the feeling that modern life itself has infected the human body. The city, the machine, the workplace, desire, violence, everything merges until the person disappears inside the transformation. Tsukamoto's low-budget style gives the movie its power. The grainy photography, frantic editing, clanging sound design, and handmade effects make it feel like a transmission from inside an overheated engine. Tetsuo became a defining work of Japanese cyberpunk because it stripped sci-fi down to its rawest fear. Technology is not outside us anymore. It is under the skin. As number one, it is almost impossible to beat. Akira shows mutation on an epic scale, but Tetsuo makes mutation intimate, filthy, and immediate. It is a nightmare of metal replacing identity, and its final message lands like a hammer. The future will not simply control the body, it may become the body. And that was the dark side of Japanese sci-fi, where technology does not save humanity, it mutates it, controls it, and sometimes replaces it completely. Which film disturbed you the most, and which one would you never watch alone? Drop your pick in the comments, hit like, subscribe, and stay close because the next countdown goes even deeper into cinema's strangest nightmares.